It says that we are now live, is what it tells me here. So let's see, in a couple seconds, we should be getting a video feed of some kind coming through here. I'm always nervous about the sound.
Oh, sure.
Always. I'm always nervous about that. It's gonna be, is it gonna work? Yeah, we got sound.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna take that off of there. Let's see if everybody can hear us okay and see us okay. Are we live? Are we good? Are we here? I always need some acknowledgement from the people. What are they saying here? Hello from Oregon. All right. We are on board.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to assume that people can hear us and see us, and we're just going to proceed with our fun and games here. This is a completely non-serious, informal. I mean, a little bit. I'm going to go over some serious stuff, I guess, and some of what we're going to talk about. But destructive cults are not, a light topic, light fare. But yes, good. Looks and sounds good. Thank you. But there are some examples of it that are a little bit more outrageous.
That's true.
Gregarious.
Yeah.
Insane. Crazy.
Yeah. Narcissistic.
Yeah, kind of interesting to watch in a sort of train wrecky kind of way, I guess. And that's what we're gonna get into. Okay, so I've got a lot of notes, and we're gonna sort of switch between here. This is not a Q&A show. We'll be watching the comments and stuff, but the primary effort of this is to kind of talk at you guys, talk with each other.
Yeah.
We have been watching Netflix. We are Netflix watchers. We're big Netflix fans.
Oh yeah.
We have caught up on, and have been caught up on for quite some time, all of the stand-up on Netflix.
Definitely.
We're big stand-up fans. Oh, look, honey, it's a new one. Let's watch it tonight. I'm always doing that. Oh, that looks like a new one. So with what started happening is last week, I started getting bombarded with emails and messages and texts asking me about Tiger King. And I was like, I'd sort of seen the ad for it on Netflix. And I thought, well, that looks like the most ridiculous hillbilly train wreck I've ever... I have no idea what this is. Bunch of rednecks and tigers and, okay, whatever. I got, whatever. But I kept getting messages about it. And I thought, okay, there must be something really wild about this. And so we started watching,
last week or
Thursday?
Yeah,
something. We did two... We just started plowing through it.
Mm-hmm.
Today is Wednesday.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it was actually over the weekend that we started watching it, because we plowed through pretty fast.
That's true.
It's a 7-episode limited series on Netflix, and it is about a man named Joe Exotic, or, Joseph Maldonado something or other.
Yeah,
He's got a few different names. And he ran an exotic zoo. He collected exotic animals, especially tigers and lions and bears and
oh my,
and crocodiles and alligators. I mean, he had a wide assortment of things there. It wasn't just tigers.
All kinds of things.
And apparently, then there's the country music videos. Oh my God.
Oh, those were fun.
So Joe was kind of all over the place. And the show is mainly about him. It's called Tiger King because he's the main character. But in this, and we're going to spoil the hell out of it. So if you haven't seen this and this is something, you want to watch it and you think this is a movie review, that's not what we're doing here. We're going to break down some stuff that's going to require us to talk about real details of the show. And in fact, I'm going to go over a bunch of stuff that wasn't even in the show, that I've been researching all day today, going into some more details about some of this cast of characters. But there's basically 3, I guess you could say, faux or pseudo or maybe cult leaders in this thing.
Yeah, at least 3.
Yeah. you get a window into this entire world in the United States, this entire world that exists that you really didn't know a whole lot about unless you were directly involved with it, having to do with the display, raising, breeding, and selling of exotic animals. And this is a thing, and so much of a thing that, well, okay, let's start going over some of the facts of this. You have Joe Exotic as your mainline guy, but you also have a couple other characters that are introduced, and these are real people. I mean, it's kind of amazing. I kept telling Melissa, I don't know if you guys experienced this, but I kept feeling, especially around episode 6 or 7, when it was in the full depths of insanity. I mean, real, like, what the hell am I looking at here? I honestly started wondering if it was some kind of April Fool's prank, that it was actually all scripted and these were all actors and this was all, because
at the end of it, they'd be like, "Ha surprise!"
Yeah, ha fooled you. Because it's so crazy, but 2, because there was so much footage.
Yeah,
it was amazing how much footage there was of, and apparently found out there were 5 years of filming this thing. So here's an example. One question that I was asked just today. Tiger King is on Netflix, tremendous entertainment, but doesn't delve into the animal or human abuse. Can you share what kinds of abuse would likely be experienced by Joe Exotic and Doc Antle's respective partners besides what was briefly mentioned? Well, we will go into some of that. Now, interesting, when I was diving in to find out stuff about all of this today, I found David Spade, the comedian, had actually interviewed like 3 or 4 of these guys from the show.
Yep.
And that was interesting.
Yeah.
He got, a few people. I pulled some quotes from some of those because they are actually the only things that kind of approximate, other than the show and what it produced to you. This was the only thing I'd seen so far where some of these guys were interviewed kind of out after the fact, and it's been a couple years.
Oh, really? When did they wrap up?
Well, I guess, Joe went to jail
it was like
a year or two ago.
Years ago. Yeah.
And so they've been away from him for like a couple years. And I was very keen to hear, even though David Spade was interviewing them in a short, very trying to be funny way, I did take quotes from a couple of them that I thought would help in our little talk about this. And we're going to use this series as a window into how some of the same cult characteristics can vary from one group to another and yet still be manipulative or controlling or utilizing undue influence. We'll see some of these manifestations. But the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about or get out of the way right away is we're not doing this podcast from the viewpoint of talking about animal rights or those animal issues. I don't want to really get into that as what we're doing here. I wanted to comment on a couple things to clarify a few things for people from the show that you might be interested in knowing that wasn't covered or was sort of glossed over in the show. There's about 5,000 tigers in the United States.
Wow.
And only 6% of them, from what I could find, are in accredited facilities or zoos, which means 94%.
So are owned by some rich guy or girl.
That's right. Private collections or unaccredited zoos like Joe's. Far less exist in the wild, with estimates somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000, depending on which sources you're using. Oh, hey, thanks for that super chat. I'm checking back in here on the comments here as we're going. Okay, so as far as laws about this go, in 1900, Congress passed the Lacey Act, and that's a conservation law that prohibits trade in wildlife, fish, and plants that have been illegally taken or are illegally possessed, transported, or sold. And that was a lot, as I understand it, of what was shown. I mean, they got so much footage of that. From lots of different places. So you got the Lacey Act that's been law since 1900. Then you've got the Endangered Species Act, which was Congress passed in 1973, specifically to prevent humans from destroying species.
It's sad that we need that.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. And then there was what Carole, what was her? Baskins. I keep thinking Barnett. It's for some reason I got Barnett stuck in my head. All day today I've been like, no, that's not it. It's Baskins. Anyway, Carole Baskins was pushing for this big cat public safety act. And that was put before Congress in February of 2019 to protect big cats specifically, and that did not get passed as far as what I could find. They were unsuccessful at getting that through. But there is already protection for these animals under the Lacey Act and the Endangered Species Act. So what I want to say as far as all of that goes is I'm not down. I don't think we're down.
No.
I mean, we are not down with abusing animals, with what's shown in the show. I would not be somebody who would be interested in going to visit Joe's exotic wildlife.
No way.
I don't want to go see Doc Antle's place. I don't want to ride on an elephant. I'm not interested in petting a lion. I don't think any of those things are necessary for entertainment purposes, right? So I am basically saying that, we're against private zoos and collections that are not, authorized and accredited zoos are not okay for some people. Right. And I get it. I looked up some stuff today and I understand why.
Oh, yeah. They don't always capture the animals in the nicest way.
No, or treat them in the nicest way, or get rid of them in the nicest way. There's a number of issues there, and I do acknowledge that. But I also do believe that there are convincing arguments for keeping some animals in captivity for purposes of conservation and education. Population, et cetera, exactly. So I don't think we can just write the whole thing off and say, well, it absolutely, positively, black and white, should be forbidden across the boards, because I think that we need research and we need conservation and we need sanctuaries. And what I was sort of thinking in terms of trying to meld these worlds, because you have PETA on one end, which is at the extreme end, its own brand of extremism, which is, if you even touch an animal or look at it wrong, then we're going to, take your eye out. You get that extreme of the thing, and I don't really go there, but I can meet PETA halfway by saying, hey, look, let's take the zoo aspect of this out of the picture. And let's maybe see about converting those over where they need sanctuary level guidelines and restrictions. Right. Because as I understand it, as a very not deep into this world thing, if they were turned over to those kind of standards, then we would handle a lot of the laundry list of abuses that zoos right now could be targeted with. And that's all I can really say about it. I think we are pretty clear that we're not idiots on the matter, but we don't want to go extreme in response. No. Okay, that all being said, let's go ahead. Oh, hey, another super chat. Thank you. All right, let's get into the cult stuff now. Okay, so because we got a lot to talk about here. So let's see here. Stop being so reasonable, Chris. Thank you. Okay, let's actually review, because I want this fresh in our mind as we go through the leaders and players here, what the cult characteristics are that I've been using for years to look at what is a destructive cult. And I pulled them up from my very own website. If you go to mncriticalthinking.com, there is a page of the characteristics associated with cultic groups. I am quoting directly from Janja Lalich and Dr. Michael Langione. They are from the Institute of Cultic, or ICSA, Institute of Cultic Studies Association, something like that. And this is what they are. I've got my glasses right here. Pardon me for the big thickness here. Okay, the group displays excessively zealous and unquestioning commitment to its leader. And whether he's alive or dead, regards his belief system, ideology, and practices as the truth, as law. Okay, so I'm just throwing these out here so they're fresh in all of our minds. I'm not going to yet get into commentary on how these various players fit some of these. I just want it fresh for all of us. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished. We are definitely going to see that. Mind-altering practices such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, we're not going to see any of that. However, debilitating work routines. It's another way that you can actually alter minds, and used in excess, they serve to suppress doubts about the group and its leaders. If you are run down and worn out every day, at the end of the day, you don't have the energy or the strength of will to think about leaving, or what your alternatives are, or even stumble down the road and get on a payphone, if there even are payphones anymore.
I don't know. Probably like maybe in small towns.
I don't know. But out in these rural areas, I don't know. You're just not in a frame of mind to do that kind of thing, right? So debilitating work routines, we talk about chanting and the TRs with Scientology and all that, but you can actually work people into a state where they just can't get away.
I'm just too tired.
Yeah, exactly. And there was some of that displayed here. The leadership dictates, sometimes in great detail, how members should think, act, and feel. For example, members must get permission to date, change jobs, marry, or leaders prescribe what types of clothes to wear, where to live, whether or not to have children, how to discipline children, and so forth.
Yeah, I had a friend that was basically in a Christian cult like that. Like, you had to ask the pastor if you could date someone from the church before you could like hook up with them and stuff.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It really is. And of course this was prevalent in the Sea Org all over the place. You weren't going to get married to somebody if command didn't approve. But we are going to see some of this leadership dictating in small detail, in great detail, how people should think or act. We're going to see that in one of these groups for sure. The group is elitist, claiming a special exalted status for itself, its leaders, and members. The group has a polarized us versus them mentality, which may cause conflict with the wider society. To a degree, that is definitely true in this whole wildcat world.
Yeah, they're all like against each other.
Yeah, it's pretty, but it's interesting how alliances form and break up and form and break up too.
Yeah.
It's not all totally cutthroat. It's a weird setup. Okay, the group, the leader is not accountable to any authorities. Okay. Unlike, for example, teachers, military commanders, or ministers, people who have to answer to somebody. I'd say all of these guys are pretty under that, but we'll get into that. The group teaches or implies that its supposed exalted ends justify whatever means it deems necessary. Yeah. And this is where you get some of the most insane behavior being justified or rationalized because we're on the side of good. We're the good guys. We're on the side of right.
Right. God is on our side.
Yeah, we're the animal rights people. So anything we do is, dripping diamonds and honey.
Right.
It's all wonderful. Okay, the leadership induces feelings of shame and or guilt in order to influence or control members. Often this is done through peer pressure and subtle forms of persuasion. And again, we're going to see it in all of these guys. Subservience to the leader or group requires members to cut ties with family and friends and radically alter the personal goals and activities they had before joining the group.
Right.
We see that actually with all of these groups. We see full-time, full immersion.
Working 12, 18-hour days?
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, it was some of these, Group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. Group is preoccupied with making money.
Yeah.
Members are expected to devote inordinate amount of time to the group and group-related activities. It's all or nothing. You're with us or against us. You're all in. And the most loyal members, the true believers, feel that there can be no life outside the context of the group. They believe there is no other way to be and often fear reprisals to themselves or others if they leave or even consider leaving the group. And that is both a mix of undue influence, manipulation from the top, and peer pressure from within. So those are our checklist items, the things we use to determine. Roughly speaking, it's not a checklist of, this. It's always context specific, which is why you're going to see me kind of go, maybe this and maybe that, because the truth of the matter is the show didn't, skimmed over enough that it's not super clear that we're dealing with things that were implied in the show. And we're going to try to cover what was implied versus what we actually have factual knowledge of. Because we want to give people, when you're analyzing this kind of thing, just to be totally fair and completely unreasonably reasonable, you want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, especially in a show where you've got 5 years. They were shooting this show over 5 years. Imagine the volumes and volumes of footage that they have available to them between the security cameras, the documentarians, the news media footage, other footage they were getting hold of.
Yeah, and all the footage that he did himself.
Yeah. Oh, all the internet footage? Oh my God,
yeah.
From his channel, from his show.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, man, the media. Yeah. So there's a just probably hundreds, thousands of hours. Of footage there. There's even talk about maybe that might be used for a season 2.
Oh wow.
Yeah. As one or two of them pointed out, though, when they were being interviewed, it's pretty doubtful that we're going to be seeing. It's pretty doubtful that we're going to be seeing Carole Baskin on camera again.
Oh yeah.
In front of anybody doing season 2, or Jeff Lowe for that matter. The con guy who came in and took it from him. So funny when you see con men get conned, when you see cult leaders get culted.
Yes.
It's really interesting watching that process. So our first leader to take a look at is keeping all those characteristics in mind, and let's just make sure that we're not ignoring anything horrible in the comments here. Okay, Joe Exotic. Okay, Joseph Maldonado Passage. Okay, so this guy is a zoo cult leader, maybe. He is certainly an intense personality, but my thought on him, and I wanted to run this by you, is I didn't really see a cult of personality so much as I saw this very larger than life, very narcissistic, very self-absorbed individual who I don't know that he was always that way. Those little tiny clips we got from when he was younger.
Right.
At the very end of the show, I think there were maybe one other episode where they featured a couple shots of him as a much younger person.
Right, when he was first starting out.
And he was a very different person.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what changed. Drugs, environment.
If he's... I mean, I know his husbands were doing meth. I don't know if he was, but that'll change you.
Yeah, that'll definitely change you. That actually can't really be underestimated as in terms of some changing personality. But regardless, whether he was born that way or not, he became this extremely self-absorbed person, and I think he formed a group around him of people who actually kind of fell in love with the zoo, with the animals.
Right.
When you heard the clips, the sound bites from all the people who worked for him, every one of them commented about their love of the animals, the opportunity to take a tiger for a walk.
Yeah.
It wasn't Joe they were fascinated by, it was the animals that he kept. And I don't call that a cult of personality, but yet we still have all this cultish stuff going on there. So I'm not saying that there's no culty stuff going on there. I just wanted to sort of differentiate it from that. I think Joe was desperate to have a cult of personality.
Yeah, he was trying to.
I think he kept pushing for one. But without that catch that he had, which was these animals, that was the hook to bring these people in.
Yeah.
And he made money from it, of course, from people stopping by to see the animals. But then he also gained this group of followers, about 20 people, I think, who the zoo manager said there were about 20 people on the property.
Right.
And, okay, now, there were other husbands, by the way. There were other people. There was actually more than just this. There was a third straight husband, by the way. The show shows him married to 2 or 3 people. There was apparently another guy who was there on the property through most of the filming.
Huh. I wonder why he wasn't on film. Maybe he didn't want to be.
I think he died.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so they just kind of didn't really have a whole lot of him. Not Travis, not the guy who ended up accidentally shooting himself,
Yeah.
but another guy who you didn't
Wow.
really see a whole lot of.
Okay.
But then there was another guy who's now in jail for murder, and he was one of Joe's husbands. He was another straight guy.
Wow.
And this was interesting. I'm just going to throw some things out that I found today just to give you guys more information that was not. If you did see the show, this wasn't in the show. A police officer was contacted by a podcaster to ask about the fire at Joe's place, the studio one that burned up the crocs and the alligators and all the footage from the reality show guy. And the podcaster got an angry call back the next day from Joe Exotic directly. And turns out, this was, obviously before Joe was incarcerated. Turns out the cop was Joe's limo driver on his off time. You're like, what? So the cop gets a call and Joe's, it's a story. I don't know. It's a claim. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. But it was
very Scientology-like.
Yeah, it was something thrown out there. That's right. You wonder how is it only Scientology that would engage in what they call PR area control, zones of influence? You want local law enforcement to be on your side if there's a call. You want civil authorities, the mayor, the city council, whatever, to be favorable to you. And you do things to make that happen. And that's not unique to Scientology.
Right,
they just have turned it into a bit of a science because they've got actual policy written about how to do it.
Jesus.
Joe was just sort of making his way in the world today, So, okay. He did not sing his own songs, by the way.
I think that was pretty obvious.
Yep. Nope. That was pretty clear. Seemed pretty clear. What do we got here? Yeah. Okay. During the 1990s, this property that he purchased apparently was a horse farm. And there were horses there. And Joe originally was raising horses and got hold of his first big cat and converted the farm to the Greater Wynwood GW Zoo. And he used the horses and any others that he could get donated to feed the big cats. He started putting big cats on there, and the horses were feeding them. Apparently, that's how he went through all his horses. And anyway, and then as far as the when he ran, okay, so Joe is a guy who actually ran for president in 2016.
Yep.
Yeah, and they sort of document his so-called political campaign.
Yeah.
Hired a campaign manager. He was actually doing media. He was out there. I thought it was hilarious when I found out today that he got his name on the ballot in Colorado.
I wonder how he did that.
I guess he filled out the right forms or whatever for that. I don't know if he got on the ballot in Oklahoma, but he got on the ballot in Colorado.
Wow.
He got 962 votes total. That's what he got there. They didn't talk about that in the show.
No,
they just showed him.
Not.
Yeah, they just showed him campaigning. And then in 2018 is when he ran for governor. And he got a whopping 664 votes in that campaign. So not
really sad.
Yeah, pretty pathetic. Not super effective. And they talk about the charisma of these guys, but I think it's kind of obvious that the charisma is limited to what I don't want to say class, but a certain
type of people.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that because I don't think it depends on economic class. I think it depends on personalities.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what he tunes into with people, but
I think he tunes into people that are in hard times. Like he kind of takes advantage of that.
Yes, he definitely, for his followers, he definitely does.
Yeah.
But his amicability, his amiability, like the way he kind of comes and gets along with, and he walks around with a gun or two on.
I know, right? Like, what is that?
There's a lot. He's got a lot of this vest, these costumes and the hat and the hair
and the eyeliner
and the studs and the rings.
Yeah, all the earrings and the...
Yeah, like he himself is this show, and he paints himself, he puts himself out there that way. And it's interesting enough and unusual enough that it almost attracts everybody's attention, but I think the people whose attention stays, like there's some other bonding point there, and I don't really know what that is. maybe it's also just the fact that maybe some people are just so fascinated by the guy because it's such an interesting train wreck watching him navigate through life.
That's for sure.
I think that's a big part of his appeal as far as the show goes.
Yeah.
You know, because he's actually, when you get down to it, once you've watched him for a little while, he becomes a very uninteresting person.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Okay, but there were some quotes, and I'm going down to them right now. One thing people should know, or might want to be interested in knowing, Rick Kirkham, the reality show producer who lost all of his footage in that fire that they suspect Joe of setting. I mean, let's just say that out loud. You know, the person who had the most gain from all that reality footage going away appeared to be Joe.
Right.
Well, Rick, after he left, he said he had this nervous breakdown. Well, he ended up in Dallas, is where he relocated to. He had an apartment there. And apparently, that apartment burned.
Oh, Jesus.
His dog was killed in that fire.
Man.
And it's reported that it might have started with him still in the apartment. It's not suspected he did it, but arson, I guess, was suspected. So they never found out who set that apartment fire either.
That guy can't win, man.
Yeah, just a little weird. I'm not gonna say one way or the other. I mean, it's just conjecture or whatever.
No way to know,
who knows? But it's just weird. Okay, Kelsey Saffery, the woman who lost her hand. She did the most interesting interview with David Spade.
Oh.
And I quoted from her stuff extensively because she spoke the most about getting there, being there, and her attitude about Joe. She left in June 2018, which she said was around the same time that Joe left. She was the one who she says herself, hey, thanks for that super chat, Alex. She said herself that her accident was 100% her fault, that she had been inattentive at a moment when she should have been attentive. She knew that. She put her hand in a place that she shouldn't have. This was understood. This was not like, now I don't know whether she did that if she was, overworked or not. I think there could be factors there that could be looked at. But she herself puts zero blame on anybody but herself for that accident. I was more struck by the fact that she felt compelled to come back to work after only 5 days.
Yeah.
That was like, that was eyebrow-raising moment. That was like, what?
That's a tough girl right there.
Yeah, and she had the public image of the zoo in mind, and letting Joe down in mind. And she said, the reason I was there, she said after Joe left, she left. She said in June 2018, and she said the reason I was there went away, so I left. So she appears to be somebody who actually was drawn to or somehow, there for Joe, or Joe was a big part of why she was there. Oh, hey, another super chat there. Thank you. Love those things.
Wow.
All right. So, she said, Joe has a heart for sure, 100%. I've seen it with the animals and whatnot, which is why I got on board the first place. We both had this passion and this love for animals in general, but you learn very quickly that he's very fast to tell you what he knows you want. So he's a man of many masks. He can be anything. She said that. That was insightful, as far as some hindsight look at this guy, his relationship to her, and how he could be. She said, my day started with, let's just get through this day. Every day. It's a lot of work just following the rules that are already in place. It's not easy. That's one thing the documentary didn't really point out, is that it's not easy to own a big cat in general.
Oh, no way.
Where do these people come from? And I tell them it's people that, for the most part, have nowhere else to go. The people, meaning the people who were working at the zoo.
Yeah, a lot of them were ex-felons and got out of jail and went there.
That's right. That's right, because Joe was out picking them up that way. And she said, in reference to all these cast of characters, all these people who were in the show, she said, I met all these people in person and they come off on camera exactly the same way. I mean, and I'm quoting directly here. She said, that's just them. So you're not seeing like a show. This is them. This is them in real life. So she thought it was pretty accurate portrayal of all these different people, and she was kind of one of the least bullshit people on the show.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. So I found her quotes and views on it to be of value. And she talks in this, she says this business, it's people that for the most part have nowhere else to go. Those are the people that Joe is pulling in. And there was another quote from John Reinke. Okay, now John Reinke was the park manager. He was the man who had the prosthetic legs. He had lost both of his lower legs in an earlier situation. He was 24 hours a day. His job was zoo manager. And also remember what she had just said about being worked so hard.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right? That again, I'll harken back to those cult characteristics. First thing that's coming up, right, is these guys are working their asses off 7 days a week at this place. You saw the living conditions, at least we saw a representation of their living conditions as horrid. How could you possibly live in something like that? They were worse than Sea Org conditions in a number of ways.
I mean, I just remember Joe's bedroom, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, Joe's bedroom.
What is going on in there? Yeah.
Yeah, Joe was pretty clearly off the rails, but he at least had a choice in how he was going to live. These guys were being provided with quarters, but they were, it was bad. They were dirty. It was rat infested. I mean, it was bad. There were vermin. But how could you live in something like that? Well, if you're working an 8-hour-a-day job and you're spending 5 to 8 hours there, you'd be intolerable. It'd be insane. Yeah. But I think most of these guys were actually working so much, and were probably even having to get up at night to deal with situations. I mean, you've got. I don't even know where to begin. What kind of emergencies could come up with bears, lions, tigers, alligators, crocodiles, monkeys, right? Baboon. I mean,
they could just go crazy and start attacking each other. I mean, not all of them, but I mean, they might get in fights and stuff. And
exactly. And what happens when they're having those low times? What happens in the winter versus the summer when it's hot, when it's cold? I mean, who knows what kind of craziness could go on in that kind of environment, and what these people were going to have to deal with. So, yeah, the idea of just getting up and walking away from that.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Once you're in that world. And these are people, again, Joe's pulling in people who are already people who have nowhere else to go. But also, what John said was, Joe always made sure he was the center of attention, so he always got people lesser than him. So he's already right out of the gates. He's so-called whining and dining them. He's love bombing them to start. Brings them in, right? I got a job for you. Got a place for you. We're going to take care of you. They show up. Another thing that the park manager made a statement about was he said, your life was the zoo. You were there all the time. There probably wasn't 3 driver's licenses on the whole zoo with 20 employees. I mean, that's the kind of people that came. So, ... Right? And he said that, John said he hasn't talked to Joe since he was incarcerated. He said, not because I hate Joe. I mean, hell, I have to love the guy. I was there for 14 years. I think at one time I was the only straight guy at the whole zoo. We just built a bond, and I knew if I called him while he was incarcerated, he wouldn't shut his mouth. And that's what got him in all this trouble, because he wouldn't shut his mouth. And he would spill his guts, and everything's recorded. So even then, he still got this bond with this guy.
Yeah.
It was an interesting dynamic, these people. Again, it's like this completely abusive, horrible environment. And I don't know. I don't know if people from this, well, I don't know, dare I say socioeconomic level, who are used to this life, who have been from this life and are just, this is just another part of it, can see beyond to see, like, that how much they were being taken advantage of and used.
Right. I mean, they probably came from that, like their families were probably like that or something, and it's just that's the usual thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a cycle of abuse, I think, that can happen there when you go from one to the next and you don't recognize it. It took me years to figure out some of the levels of abuse I was involved in, even after I knew how bad Scientology was. I still didn't see parts of it as abusive. So it doesn't surprise me at all that, a year or two out with no counseling or attention at all, some of these folks are still kind of, oh yeah, I bonded with this guy. And, he's a narcissist. He doesn't care about any of these people.
No, not at all.
But there are certainly tools for him. And that, to that degree, he will care about them, and he will say the things that he thinks they want to hear.
Yep.
That he needs to say to keep them loyal or keep them around. So, I think that's kind of how these relationships work with this guy. And we see that in some of these quotes and stuff. Just going to check in again with the comments here, make sure we're not going too crazy here. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, just checking in with you folks. Oh, hey, super chat. Thank you. This is from Terry. Awesome. What did she say here? Saf is trans, goes by he, wasn't mentioned in the show. Oh, thanks for pointing that out. Saf is trans, goes by he. Good to know that.
I didn't know.
I totally did not know that.
Yeah.
Didn't even think about it. Okay, good. All right, so those were the two interviews that David Spade did that I could pull quotes from that were the most useful for trying to figure out what relationship these people had with Joe in the real world, not just what was shown on camera.
Right.
So between the circumstances and between what they've said, I figure, okay, we've got a situation here where this guy is just pretty much ruthlessly taking advantage of anybody and everybody he can, because for whatever reason, he got to a point where he realized that animal rights weren't the fight he was going to win. So instead he thought, well, let me make money off this, let me start getting the ego satisfaction that I need.
Yeah.
And then that just built. And I don't imagine that the drugs helped at all.
Oh my God, no.
Right. I don't imagine that that's true. That's my thumbnail analysis of that. I'm not going to go deeper because I don't have enough information to go deeper right now. But what a character, huh? Damn, what a character, that guy. Okay. Now, there was another guy. Let's go from Joe and his wild and crazy ways and his showmanship and his gun-toting, I'm the guy in charge here. Okay, we pretty much get that picture. And we get these people who really were at the end of the line, and they got stuck following him for no other reason than they were in the wrong place at the wrong time to get honey bombed and dragged over to this place and then end up in these slave-like conditions working for him while he's self-aggrandizing. I mean, that's, in a nutshell, that's the situation with Joe Exotic and his little cast of characters, and it's just, ugh. Okay, now we get a very different situation when we go over to, and I don't even know how to say this guy's name, Mahamayavi Bhagavan. Kevin Antle, okay, Doc Antle, this guy. Now, apparently, this is really his name. I guess he had a mother who is not Indian, but his mother loved Indian stuff. And I got all kinds of stuff that I pulled today from Oxygen.com, Rolling Stone, a few other places. So I'm just going to go over a few things about him. And let's start talking about him. And I'm going to fill in a lot of stuff because there was so little about him in the documentary. It was mainly about Joe, of course, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and get into that. First off, Doc is the founder and director of Tigers, the Institute of Greatly Endangered and Rare Species. A little bit of a stretch there, I think.
Yeah.
Make tigers. Anyway, that's at Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. He's got a 50-acre wildlife preserve. According to his website, he's the founder of the Rare Species Fund, a grassroots organization to support wildlife conservation. Okay, it's a self-claim. I don't know how effective it is. He dropped out of high school before the 9th grade, moved to China, and while he was there, he earned the title Doctor of Mystical Science. Okay.
What does that even mean?
I do not know, but it allows him to call himself Doc.
Doc.
In the 1980s, he returned to Yogaville, Virginia, where he practiced spiritual medicine and worked as a lecture guru.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Yeah. So this guy sort of styles himself in an Indian tradition, and I found that fascinating because that was really only kind of hinted at, kind of touched on a little bit. And in 1982, he bought his first ever tiger cub. His interns and women that he has working for him basically are working under Sea Org conditions. As soon as they talked about the hours, I mean, 12, 16, 18
There's
hour days.
There's a lot of hours. They live much nicer than Joe's people, but they all live with, like, in different houses on his property.
Yeah, very controlled environment. Yeah. We find out here that under these work conditions that were described in the documentary, and from what I've read, I've found nothing that contradicts what was talked about there, even coming out of his mouth, and we'll get into some quotes from him where he refutes some cult stuff. But this guy has women who are single and unmarried by demand. They cannot be involved in anything, can't have any kids. They come work for him, and they go through this whole rigorous process, and he says the working conditions are very, very hard, and there's no way they're just not exhausted all the time.
I'm pretty sure, like, telling people they have to be married and single to work for you is illegal, but
yeah, well, he just won't accept the application otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now in 2019, at the end of the documentary, it said that his property was raided, and it was. In connection with Wild Wilson's Animal Park in Virginia. But they didn't find anything incriminating. So Doc's place has not shut down. It's still operating. In fact, today, right now, it's still going. And they're still actively inviting people to come, as of a report I read this afternoon, even though there is this, the whole coronavirus situation going on right now. Speaking to Rolling Stone, Antle explained that Tiger staff members must complete an intensive apprenticeship to work at the zoo. They must be single and childless. He explained that his staff learned to work, quote, in a manner akin to a military series of maneuvers, unquote. He also revealed that his senior staff get some freedom, but new apprentices don't have as much, whatever that's supposed to mean. And coming from a cult leader, that's saying quite a bit. And I do think that this guy's got something going on cult leader-like.
Yeah.
He's become a commercial success by hosting cub petting for visitors and selling newborn cubs. I mean, this guy is either skating right along the lines of, or is outright flaunting the acts of Congress that we talked about at the beginning of this thing.
Breaking all kinds of laws here.
I really don't understand how these guys are getting away with this so boldly. Maybe the FBI is now on it. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
I couldn't really tell from this, but it just seemed that that the entire series could be submitted as Exhibit A in any court. To take these guys.
Probably too busy doing other things like, fighting the war on drugs or something, because that takes away from all kinds of crimes.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. He offers tours 3 times a week during the summer. Costs $400 per person. And photos with the animals start at $150. And you can't go in there with your own video recorders or anything and take pictures. Claims to have earned a Doctor of Natural Science degree from the Chinese Science Foundation.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like Hubbard's doctorate from Liberty University or something, some mail-in place.
Place or something, yeah.
Now, Antle's actually really been in the limelight. He was in a Britney Spears performance in 2001 at the MTV Music Awards, where they had a caged tiger and an albino python draped over Britney Spears' shoulders. Yeah. And he's provided animals for Dr. Dolittle, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, etc. So he's kind of really he seems to be the one that I think Carole Baskin's even said he's the one who's the real shady, shifty operator. Joe Exotic's thing is small time compared to what this guy's been doing. Right. And he's been doing it for decades. Antle told Oxygen.com that he does not want to be associated with the likes of Exotic nor Baskin. Said Exotic was a drug person and Baskin is an animal extremist. Said his preserve is the most spacious and comfortable one. 22 staff operation, 150 animals. They rake in $3 million during a good year. Okay. And his son Cody is an Instagram sensation, not just because of the documentary. Apparently has been for years. Been posting videos of himself with animals and,
People love their animals on the internet.
Well, it takes a little pussy to get a big pussy, right? That's what they said in the show. And that's what they said in the show. And apparently it's true. Okay, so in terms of addressing the cult charges, so let's go into this with Doc now. Um, the trailer for Tiger King docuseries strongly suggests he's running some kind of cult. Maria Tabru claimed in Tiger King that he has 3 wives. Others in the docuseries suggested he has up to 5, and one even said he has 9. Antle said in the series that a, quote, great big cohesive family unit runs his conservation and that many of his workers came on as apprentices when they were teens. In Tiger King, he referred to a woman nicknamed China, who's been living on the preserve since she was 17, his longtime girlfriend partner. There's also Rajni, who has been there 20 years, and Moksha, who has been there for 16 years. Now, these names are not their original names.
Yeah, he was dressing them too in there, like telling them what to wear.
That's right. Let's harken back to some of our cult characteristics now. Name changes, demanding how they dress, demanding how they live, providing them with everything that they have to live, all the room and board. And believe me, I know from the Sea Org, when somebody controls your room and board, they control you.
Oh, sure.
Who knows if these women are even allowed to carry around their ID, their passports? How often are they allowed off the property? How often do they get a chance to get off the property if they're all working 16 to 18-hour days?
Right.
And you think this kind of thing can't go on for years. I assure you it can. I was in the Sea Org for, 16 years? I can't even remember how many years anymore. Long time. And 95 to 2012. Yeah, 17 years.
Yeah.
I was under a work schedule very much like that. Not quite as demanding during some of those years. More than that demanding when I was on the RPF. So, up and down. But I can tell you that people can endure conditions like that for a very long period of time. But the longer you're involved in it, the more it messes with your head, the more it messes with your ability to think rationally. And remember also that when it comes to undue influence, the reason why you can't quite trust even the people themselves, the cult followers, and what they have to say when they're under those conditions is because their ability to think critically disappears when it comes to the cult leader and the cult belief system and the cult situation. And I can't say 100% that is absolutely positively what's going on with these women who are working for Doc Antle, but all the markers are there. So, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, then I'm going to say, hey, maybe it's quacking, Okay, now he told Oxygen.com that it's not true that he's in some relationship with all of these women. So to give the other side a little bit, because he has put this out there and it wasn't in the documentary, he said, quote, when I say my girl, it's a cowboy saying. It's not that these are my wives. He said that the scene was taken out of context. As for how many wives he has, he said he has 0. He says, sure, I've had girlfriends, and there's girls I've had relationships with that have come and gone over the decades. However, he said he's been single ever since his wife died in a car crash. He said, I'm absolutely not married now, nor have I been since my wife died over 20 years ago now. I'm not married, and I certainly don't have wives. I certainly am a single guy, and I live in a house by myself.
Yeah, he just happens to surround himself with some super hot women.
Right, who don't live in the house. He's right. They don't. He doesn't have to be lying there for this to still be a completely weird situation, right? He's got them living in what one former member described as horse stalls. Ugh. I mean, it's really bad. But he says, I do not have a harem. I'm what they call OFG these days, old, fat, and gray. I embrace that character, and I'm not chasing down women. 20 years ago, I was more of a dashing fellow, but even then, I was ultra-conservative. He says he doesn't drink, smoke, or eat meat. He said, the cultiest thing about us is that I totally believe that yoga has helped me stay limber and strong and made my life a better thing. He said, the locals think of him more as a country bumpkin than any type of cultist. We're very down-to-earth people. Okay, if I hadn't heard all of that before, I read all this today, right? And I went, yeah, I've literally read all of that before from other groups. Mm-hmm. So, okay. All right, fair enough. That's his side of the story. Great. Barbara Fisher, who worked under Antle from '99 to 2007, claimed in the docuseries that that to make it to the top of Antle's preserve, one would have to have sex with him. Fisher even likened her experience working with Antle to being a suicide bomber. She told the producers he preferred to be his apprentices' first sexual partners, so they would be bonded to him in this way where he felt like he could get them to do anything. Okay. Is sexual predation and sexual grooming a thing? Yeah, it is. Do cult leaders use it? Yeah, they do.
Definitely.
Have there been cults centered around sexual grooming where young women, teens, young 20s, women whose brains have not even yet fully developed, as well as men?
Yep.
Right? It equally applies to there, but we're talking here about sex cults, and there have been plenty of them. And if you want to know just how awful it can get, go check out a group called The Family, or Google flirty fishing. And you'll find that sex has even been used as an inducement to get people into these groups, because these women fall so much under the spell of a cult father figure, which Doc Antle aptly represents, that they will do anything for that person. So is that the situation with his stable of women, apprentices, interns, people who are working for him? Well, it's an awful unusual request that all the women who are going to do that work, and notice that they are all women, have to be single and can't have any kids.
Right. What is that with that, you know?
Exactly. What's up with that? Okay. He said that in terms of this woman, Barbara Fisher, that this is the ramblings of a crazy child who has a lot of, in my opinion, issues, and somehow those have boiled up. That's his disclaimer for Barbara Fisher's entire story.
So he doesn't really have answers.
No, not exactly. And she is being very specific in her statement. She is not being broad or generalized.
Right. And he's being broad.
Yeah. And to write it all off as crazy is sort of a Scientology kind of response, frankly. Okay. Now, there was another angle on this, which I hadn't actually considered until I started reading about it in Vice today. And this is another culty angle of this that because I have not gotten deeply into a whole lot of Indian cults. We talked about Nityananda, and that's about the only real Indian cult I've gone down the line on. There are some other indicators here that I had missed, which Vice did not miss, which I'm going to go over with you guys on cult stuff. And this has to do with Indian appropriation. And this is a fascinating thing. I'm just going to quote directly from Vice.com to give you guys what this is about. There is a history and even a name for this phenomenon of looking like a Kevin, but adopting a name from the Indian subcontinent. French psychiatrist Régis Hérault coined the term India syndrome in 2000 in his book, Faux de l'Indie, the title of which translates to Crazy About India. Recalling his time serving in the Mumbai consulate, he recounts fellow Frenchmen losing their shit on their path to spirituality, who were seeking a cultural space that is pure and exotic, where real values have been preserved. Okay. So this is the thing. And apparently there are historical examples of this. There's a guy, Richard Alpert, the icon of 60s psychedelia, who changed his name to Ram Das, a name given to him by a guru in India. Quote, by my measure, he also seemed like a legitimately cool dude. But for every Das, there's some other white guy with a fresh new Hindu name participating in bad behavior like tiger cub hoarding and abuse of women under the guise of being, quote-unquote, enlightened. Another example is Christopher Sanborn, who changed his name to Mukandi Singh and became known for selling unfiltered, unsterilized water as a new health trend in 2017.
Did anybody die? Because that sounds terrible.
In the 80s, there was Yogaville, an ashram community in Virginia started by Swami Satchidananda, the guru who opened Woodstock. Now remember that it was in the early 80s that Doc went to Yogaville, Virginia, which is where this Swami guy was. And Satchidananda blessed Yogaville by dumping holy water onto a building dome while leaning out of a helicopter, as a Washington Post reported in 1986. Antle makes an appearance in the story, as he performed a magic show at the temple dedication ceremony and brought along the 2 tigers he had used in Exxon commercials, further perverting his Indian aura and purported closeness with nature. This is all from the Vice article. And the guy said, the guy who wrote the article was an Indian, and he said, as an Indian person watching Antle's saga on Tiger King, there's little to relate to in terms of his Indianness, aside from the urge to call himself a doctor. Indian parents would be horrified at the lack of homework done. There is not even a consensus within Antle's family as to what the name Bhagavan means. Fisher, the former employee, says it means Lord. Antle says it means you're a friend of God. His son Cody says it means master of the universe, an all-knowing, all-seeing kind of guy. How'd you like to be raised thinking that of your dad?
Yeah, that definitely sounds like that guy has a god complex.
Right? Yeah. Okay, so this is to say that Antle's actual connection with Indian culture is laughable. He has an Indian name and gave new Indian names to his possibly captive white employees, but the similarities end there. So there's this whole other corruption going on with Doc in regards to the whole Indian appropriation thing. And I've always kind of laughed at some of the antics of certain social justice warriors who go on a tear about cultural appropriation.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's really silly. Like, I mean, who cares if you're wearing dreads or something? But, like, some of it, you're like, that's going a little too far and a little weird.
This is definitely what I would call falls under the umbrella of cultural appropriation. When you're taking Indian names, you don't even care what they mean.
Yeah.
Acting guru-like, getting involved in this yoga stuff, getting involved in and running the stable of women. You just think to yourself, I've seen this story too many times in too many places over too many years. I mean, I have now that I can't just look at that and go, okay, Doc, you're all good.
Yeah, exactly.
No way. This guy's got something creepy going on. I think we've really only seen the tip of the iceberg with him, and I would be very interested in a deep dive take on what that guy's up to, because I think what he's put together, just in terms of the number of animals the guy's got, the property that he's got, the influence that he has created in Hollywood. I mean, he's been to Washington. In fact, he was the one who cleverly defanged Carole.
Yeah, by bringing the little cute babies to Washington with him. And
that's right. It was actually quite good. It was quite brilliant counter PR. She goes to Washington. For those of you who haven't seen the show, if you're still with us and going along on this, she goes to Washington to get this Big Cats Act passed in Congress, but he's already been there. And he's already taken tiger cubs and little babies and gotten Congress people and members of Congress to pose with these animals. And so how can they now pass this act saying that what they just did...
They're just so sweet, right?
Right. Was totally illegal, right? No, they got pictures. They can't just do that. So he's a pretty smooth guy. And he definitely comes across way more amiable and acceptable socially than Joe Exotic did.
Yeah.
And even as Carole does. I mean, Carole walks around in these furry outfits that are kind of,
oh my God, yeah.
A little silly, and kind of puts herself out there that way. And we'll get to Carole in a second. But Doc, I thought watching this that, there's so many question marks. There's so many markers of, truly abusive stuff that could be going on that man's property that concerns me a great deal. I have to speak in these, reserved conservative terms because we don't have proof of anything. We just have markers.
Right.
But I would really like to see, somebody who actually understands what they're doing, a Yanya Lalich, a Steve Hassan, a licensed therapist, right, a Rachel Bernstein, go in there and interview these women one-on-one individually and find out what they can find out. That would be something that would offer me a great deal. Like if they came out and were like, okay, no, we're cool, my blood pressure on the whole thing would come way down. But seeing what I've seen, I think this guy's got something really seriously abusive going on that property, and I think it needs to be investigated. So that's my take on that whole thing. Okay, so let's see here. Just checking in on our comments again, making sure we're not going too far off the rails. Okay, so let's talk about Carole Baskins. Now, Carole... Jesus Christ, man. All right, first off, in terms of some background and some other information about her that came out, following this whole thing, she's got a place that she is referring to as a sanctuary, not a zoo. Right. She says it's accredited and approved. Okay. She's got her first husband, Don Lewis, this guy who was claimed in the show that he was a millionaire, or at least he certainly had a whole lot of money. And he disappeared August 1997. He's never been seen, never found a body. It's really, really hard to prosecute to turn a missing persons case into a murder case without a body. It's hardly ever done. Right. There's zero physical proof, but there also appears to be pretty lackadaisical investigation. And there are now... it's now being treated as a cold case and the sheriff is now, to his credit, soliciting for more information if anybody's got anything. So at least he's put that call out there so it doesn't appear completely incompetent. But this is, and I'm being hard on them, maybe unfairly so. I know law enforcement is difficult and missing persons cases are the worst. And lacking physical evidence, how can you say, well, it was murder? Absolutely, I just know it. I mean, no, we don't. We don't know that. The guy could have legitimately been suffering from Alzheimer's, had an episode of some kind, fallen down a goddamn well for all we know.
Right.
It really is.
We don't know for sure.
We don't know, right? All we know is that his truck appeared by the airport, which is very strange.
Right.
Appeared to be abandoned there. None of his planes were gone, and he's just this kind of interesting guy, this Don Lewis guy. But Carole, even the way she met him.
Yeah.
He picks her up off the street.
Yeah, that was weird.
Then they go to a motel. Anyway.
Yeah, and then she stayed married for a few years, and I think he was married, and he was married too. And
yeah, at the time.
They were both married. And
it was it wasn't so great. Sanctuaries are supposed to be closed to the public, apparently, is what I've read today. Hers is open, and she charges to show off big cats. So how's that functionally different from a zoo?
That's not, yeah.
I don't see that there is a difference there. Why have a sanctuary in the first place if the idea is that all the big cats shouldn't be in cages? What is she doing? She could do all of her activism without that property and without having those cats in fences and cages.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Or whatever other animals she's got there. Yeah, and okay, then as far as this thing with her husband, okay, so you've also got the fact that this will shows up that says, in the event of my death or disappearance, and you really thought, what?
Yeah, well, I mean, because I've worked on power of attorneys before at my job. I have to read them and enter them in, and I've never seen that. Like, I've seen, my incompetence or it's already happening, but never like disappearance. I was just like, that's weird.
Yeah, and this will or this power of attorney statement said, in the event of my death or disappearance.
Yeah.
So little questionable there. It's kind of
specific.
little bit like L. Ron Hubbard's will that was suddenly, like kind of different from the will he had before he died. It appears 3 days after he's dead, and it's got his signature on it. And you're like, really? No one writes, in the case of my disappearance, in their will. So,
and no one's expecting that.
Yeah, so it's unusual enough, and the circumstances of her husband's disappearance are unusual enough that I think, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not even pretending to play one on TV or video here, but it seems to me that a reasonable person would have a good cause to suspect that she's guilty of disappearing the guy. I mean, there's enough markers of weirdness here, and also, she had a former boyfriend who also filed a restraining order. Her husband, Don Lewis, tried to file a restraining order against her because he said, she's going to kill me. Well, apparently she had an earlier boyfriend who did the same thing. Feared for his life, he said. So he's not dead now, so she didn't, but that happened. And she said that she was misled and has refuted some of the statements. Now, keep in mind, this thing was being filmed over 5 years. So, the story, the documentarians, their statement back, when she said, look, you guys told me that this was going to be like Blackfish, and we were going to be exposing all this criminal, underworld of the wild exotic animal world and all of this. And yet, during the course of all this time, she opened up about everything.
Oh, yeah.
So it should have been fairly clear to anybody with, two gray cells to rub together that this thing was going to go, that could have gone in all kinds of directions based on what they were filming. And so I don't know that she was, as misled as she is pretending.
No.
She seems very good to me, just as a comment from my perspective. She seems very, very good at playing the victim. There's a playing to that. There's a look. There's an attitude. There's an emotional, output. There's this plea for sympathy. These are characteristics of certain personality types, which she demonstrates. All of these guys, Antle, Joe, they're so self-absorbed.
Yes.
And yet they have this cause that they preach about. But the actions that they carry out, Carole, to her credit, has gone to Washington, has put legislation forward, has tried to walk the walk to a degree. So I'm not saying she's just a big con artist. I'm not saying that at all. I think she really does believe in this cause. But she's got some creepy stuff going on, at least according to what was shown in the episode. And obviously anybody in Joe's camp was told right from the get-go. They didn't have to have a whole lot of experience with her. They were told right when they got on Joe's property.
Oh, yeah.
Carole Baskin
She's the enemy.
Yeah, she's scum. She's horrible. She's awful. She should die. The John, the park guy, he was like, he said, I don't know anybody who hasn't said she should die at some point. Like, clearly these people were pretty deep into hating Carole Baskin. But I kind of have to take David Spade, his attitude in his interviews with the people he was talking to was, as wild and crazy as Joe Exotic was, and as tuned up as he was on himself and his greatness, the sheer number of times this guy threatened to take her out.
Oh, yeah.
On video, on YouTube, in front of God, the world, and everybody. Over and over and over. Killing her in effigy, burning, hiring a double and putting her in a music video. That was a really good double.
Yeah, she was.
It was kind of creepy watching that music video he put together with her feeding tigers or whatever. He did this so blatantly and openly that you think to yourself, would somebody who's done that, would they really purposefully then hire somebody for $3,000 to go kill her?
I know, right? Because it'd be like, there's so much evidence. Why would you?
He
was pretty weird.
You would be at the top of every single person's suspect list. Inspector Moron would put you at the top of the list. Like, everybody would have you front and center. And when they're doing a murder investigation, if they had actually carried it out and she had been killed, they would have ripped they would have had warrants. They would have probable cause with all those videos that he had put out. They would have gone in there and ripped up his hard drives, ripped up his files, ripped into everything. Because he was so obvious about it. And I think Joe was familiar enough with law enforcement, how he had a cop limoing him around, that, would he knowingly do that? Or could he have been set up to do that by Jeff Lowe? Well, they definitely made a compelling case of insinuation. They insinuated a very good case that he could have been set up. And Jeff, who seemed to provide a whole lot of video footage and seemed to be secretly recording stuff all over the place, you wonder how they got some of that footage. And you're like, that came from Jeff Lowe's phone. Okay. Wow, how incriminating that video is that Jeff
That
Lowe
you took, yeah.
Wow, how interesting that Joe's out of the picture now, Jeff, because of that video you took. Like, you have to wonder a little bit. Jeff Lowe's clearly somebody who partners with people and alienates them on a regular basis. So, anyway, yeah. So, could Joe Exotic be a horrible person, be a narcissistic con man who just uses people to his advantage, and then himself get taken advantage of? Absolutely.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely. And I think that that's exactly what happened here. And wow, it is just really something, I couldn't believe Jeff Lowe, that guy. You know how they were sort of playing in the documentary at hiring that nanny?
Yeah, yeah.
The like double D, like size
oh God, yeah.
48 whatever nanny, right?
Yeah,
from the online thing. They did. That is who they hired.
Yep.
She sat on his knee during David Spade's interview with them. With the baby, the new baby, and his wife sitting right next to him. I mean, they have a very interesting lifestyle.
Yeah.
I'm actually not down with. I'm not against poly. I'm actually okay with it.
Yeah.
I don't really have huge moral judgments about what people want to do with themselves in the bedroom and stuff. But it really assaults my reality a little bit that he's got one woman he's just had a baby with, and now he's got the next one sitting on his knee. That just kind of strikes me as manipulative. I don't know. I just don't. I don't like the vibe of that.
It doesn't feel like it's like healthy poly, like where everyone's agreeing to things and continually checking in that kind of
it's hard. it's hard to make. It's easy. Well, I should say it's easy to make moral judgments about things that we disagree with on a moral level.
Right.
Once you open yourself up to the idea that other people can have different moral ideas than you do, then you got to open up to other realities. But Jeff Lowe is just such a creepy. Yeah, I mean, somebody commented here. He's a massive creep. Yeah, he's creepy. So I don't trust him, and I don't trust that the things that he says or represents on camera are actually the whole picture. These guys were following him around for 5 years, and he was incredibly open and sharing of stuff during the process of the documentary. I mean, surprisingly so. So I could be full of shit here and suspecting that the guy's up to no good. But that's, I don't know. It's just questionable. Yeah. So, I think we're on the same page, you guys. I think there's a big creep factor there that you just kind of go, there's got to be something more going on under the hood there. And that seems to be the case with all these guys. It seems that a 7-hour series breaking down these 3 different groups of people, Oh, Carole Baskin's, her volunteers. I didn't comment on that. Her volunteers. Yeah. Oh, man. I mean, she's got a whole nother operation going, kind of even better than Doc's operation, because she's got volunteers who are vying for shirt colors.
Yeah. And they're not even getting paid.
And then she's laughing about how she doesn't even know their names until they're there for like 4 years. I mean, if that scene alone definitely sells you on the fact that this woman is a user.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't care about anybody else except herself. And her cause is the only thing that matters, and nothing else matters. She doesn't have to pay these people. She's getting away scot-free without paying them. So why would it enter her mind that she should start paying them?
Right, right.
Or provide the bare minimum necessary and just use these people. And they were working long hours. They weren't just a couple hours a day. Although there's probably a tiered structure of some kind. But, again, I know what volunteer work feels like. Compelled voluntary work feels like. And it ain't the unicorns and rainbows that these women were gushing about on camera. And I really wish that they had gone into more detail about that stuff. I would love to see more of the footage that these guys are sitting on about this. They had this compelling story, this fascinating, entertaining story to tell about this crazy guy, and they spent most of their time focusing on him. They've probably got a whole lot of footage that documents a whole lot of nastiness going on under the hood with these groups, and especially at Carole Baskin's property.
Yeah, they could definitely just do a spin-off series about her and then a spin-off series about Doc Antle.
Yeah, exactly. Not that either one of them are going to agree to
Yeah,
it.
probably not.
But they've already signed away the rights on all that footage.
Yep.
So who knows what else is there. I can only cross my fingers that there is more there and that it'll be shown at some point, because I suspect that there's actual criminal activity there. But again, I just suspect it. I can't accuse anybody of anything on that. So, that's where I'm looking at on that thing. I just kept watching that thing. By about the second episode in, I think I tweeted out something like, oh, 2 episodes into Tiger King. This looks familiar. Like, everything about it was like a walk down memory lane for me in a number of ways. So, I was hoping one of those cats would take Jeff's arm off. Jeff actually did get bitten by a cat.
Ooh.
He described it in the interview with Spade. He talked about the pressure of it and how frightening it is. He actually has been damaged by a big cat. Okay, so those are basically my kind of flyby look at these 3 groups based only on the information that we have. I wish I wish we could get more information about this, but I think with that look, we can see here how these characteristics that I was describing at the beginning, that I walked everybody through, how they manifest in different ways. Here you have this potentially sex cult or slave cult with women over here, long hours, mental, undue influence, environmental milieu control, language control, renaming them so that he controls even who they are, who they identify as, dressing them up. I mean, this is real manipulation right front and center. So you got that whole thing going on. Then you go over to Carole's place, and you get all these volunteers who just, who believe, because she's told them so, that what they're doing is different than what Doc Antle is doing, is different from what Joe Exotic's doing, but they're doing the same stuff. They've got this zoo, basically. They charge money for people to come look at the animals, take pictures with them. This is not a sanctuary situation where nobody's allowed in, where the animals are left to just roam all off on their own. That's not what she's doing. At least not that wasn't what was represented. And her statements so far have not addressed those issues. They've just addressed, well, we're accredited, and it's sort of the acceptable truths that Scientology gets into. We'll tell you the truth so long as it makes it sound like we're the good guys, and as soon as we get into any truths that make us look like the bad guy, well, we're just not going to talk about those. We're going to avoid any comments on that matter at all. And we'll control the conversation. This is what Carole's attempting to do now by putting out this 3,000-word blog article refuting, Tiger King, and, yap, she'll gish galop you with all of these facts and sort of misdirect and obscure your questions about things that I don't want to get into, like my volunteer apprenticeship system and how I'm just using these people, I don't even know their names.
Yeah.
Because I can't be bothered, because that's not what I'm interested in, And then she's allergic to cats.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
What the hell, man? I just thought that was the most ironic thing ever, She's anyway.
Allergic to regular old cats.
Yeah, good times. And she says, don't forget Doc's. What's this now?
Don't forget Doc's surge pricing to those addicted to cat prey.
Oh, God, yes, exactly. The Saudi princes seem to have big cats. Yeah, and some of them were probably provided by Doc. I mean, I
wouldn't be surprised.
Well, they were talking about how they had, I think Joe's Zoo had taken possession of some of the, I think they had gotten a couple of their crocs or alligators from Michael Jackson's place.
Oh.
Right, from Neverland. I mean, these guys, these private reserves, celebrities, like you literally, in the United States, you don't know what's going on in your neighbor's yard.
Right. They could have anything.
Especially out in these rural areas, like, my goodness, these private collections, private reserves, celebrities who have big-ass houses out in Montana, Nebraska, Santa Ynez, like up where in California where Michael Jackson's place was. Seagal has a ranch up there. Kenny Loggins has a ranch up there. There's other celebrities who have places up there. Ojai, Central California, big, huge properties, ranches, you know, who knows what they've got going on up there. So at least, you know, the interesting thing about people like Joe now, who's dishing now on this whole thing and is going to PETA, of all people, of all places, and saying, I know where all the bodies are buried. I know where all the big cats are. I know who's got what, who's doing what. It's, you know, I hope nobody's fooled by that into thinking that they've turned a new cheek, or that they've discovered, you know, that they found God or found morality or something. Right. Because that's not what that's about.
No, it's revenge.
It's exactly, it's vindictiveness. That's right. And it is on Joe's part, I have no doubt, it is still an effort to be in the spotlight. Because Joe loves the spotlight. You know, he is the most like outrageous person that way. Apparently he had a career. I mean, he was not a career, but he also did a whole bunch of other stuff that wasn't even in the documentary. He tried doing magic. He was doing magic shows. Like, seriously, like he was all in, and he was doing like with tigers and stuff, and they would do this one disappearing tiger thing, but they would do this explosion and it would scare the tiger. So then he tried.
Oh no.
He said, okay, we won't use a tiger, we'll get a sheep.
Oh God.
And we'll paint it so it looks like a tiger.
No.
Didn't fool anybody.
Yeah, they're a little bit different sized, you know.
And the sheep was just as scared of the explosion as the tiger was. I mean, the guy, you know, you just go, my God, dude, that's crazy town. So, all right. Anyway. So the reason that we did this podcast, and I hope we've walked through some of this stuff, and you know, there's all kinds of subjective things I'm talking here. I wish I could lay down more facts about all of this, but just based on what we watched and the show you guys watched, I wanted to share how I look at this stuff and how you can see in regular day-to-day life, because as crazy as some of that was, that's just day-to-day life for a whole lot of people in the United States. It's kind of weird, but it's true.
Yeah.
That's life for some people. And those situations are culty situations that they find themselves in, or that they're in, embroiled in. And that word really didn't even come up once in the whole 7-part series. I don't think it came up once.
I don't remember it. Yeah.
I mean, it came up in response when Doc Antle, you know, replied to Oxygen confronting him on the cult charges, but that was about it. You know, I don't think people really see that as clearly as they should or could, and that's why I wanted to throw this out there to show, you know, these things aren't just little crazy UFO cults and weird little religious groups or Scientology or even multi-million-dollar activities like the JWs or the Mormons. They also could be exotic animal collectors, you know. It can really, the extremism and the authoritarianism that we talk about, and even to a degree the separatism, it can be really in any area, any subject, any field of endeavor. It can really manifest anywhere that human beings are, because we can go crazy about anything from marshmallows to collector cars to Legos to sex to religion to whatever. So I just wanted to you know, use this to sort of demonstrate that point, try to do it, and I hoped what was a fun way. I'm so far we didn't get a whole lot of hateful mail here, so I think we did okay.
Yeah.
I want to thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank all you guys for joining us in this. This was fun. Enjoyed seeing some of your comments. I will go through them after this is over. Like I said, this wasn't a Q&A, so I didn't want to get into that too much. Thank you again, all the folks who threw super chats at us. I really appreciate your support, especially now. Times are a little lean for all of us, and I really get it. But I think we're going to make it through this thing, and I think there might be more live streams like this in the future if you guys would like, as we can respond to other shows or entertainment or whatever that comes up. So, and I got other ideas for some other stuff in the past, like the Path and Handmaid's Tale and all that. I want to do some reviews of that stuff too. So, okay, guys, thanks for coming around and watching. And I'm gonna end the stream now.
Have a good night.